So, we left off yesterday. We finished the Divrei Yatziv from the Klosenberger. And I said to you today we were going to do two things. And I've actually, let's see. And I promised you a story, but I couldn't remember which one it was.
Something in England and
Yes, I could not remember. I thought about it again last night. It'll come back to you. Okay. Right. We wanted to the Vosna we saw. Vayel Moshe, page 5. Page 5. Vayel Moshe. Okay. Now, this is the Satmar Rebbe, Rabbi Yoel, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, who, of course, besides for being a big personality and having really the Satmar Chasidus, as we know it today, was really given its current form very much by Rabbi Yoel. He was he's very well known for his very strong opposition to Zionism as being kind of one of their central ideas. At the same time, clearly, he was absolutely acknowledged as a Goyin Otzum. His Yedias in Torah, he was a Godel in Torah, absolutely. Bahalocha, in Nigla and in Nista, and a Masmid Otzum, incredible Masmid, and therefore his Torah is taken very seriously as well. So, let's look. It's the left-hand column on page 5. And he writes, now he doesn't mince his words. This was his style, right? He did not mince his words. V'yesh tipshim, there are some idiots, hatoilim b'divrei HaChofetz Chaim, who use the opinion of the Chofetz Chaim, shekosa b'sefer Likutei Halachos, m'secha soita b'halachos, ha'elu she'osa l'lamei Torah l'noshim v'hevi protei adinim v'nichtav b'tzidei, v'nira. So the Chofetz Chaim writes, v'nira, and he's quoting the Chofetz Chaim, d'chol zeh bizmanim shelefoneinu, shekabbalas avos hoy chazak ma'od, etc., right? We saw all of that. V'hinei elu, go to the next bit which is underlined, and here again he's being very, I don't know how to say this, I mean I do, but he's being incredibly, in diplomatic circles, which is the word diplomacy, right? Diplomacy is the art of saying one thing and meaning another. No, sorry, that's politics. The diplomacy is getting your message across, but correct. Hence the word diplomatic, right? So what do they call it when? This is in English. In English, when how is it reported when two countries or the ambassadors of two countries scream at each other? I mean, they don't, but the equivalent of really screaming at each other, it is considered they had a full and frank exchange of views, unquote. That's in diplomatic parlance. That means they absolutely hate each other's guts and really had it, that's what it means. So the Satmar Rebbe here was not being very, not being diplomatic at all. He says, V'hinei Tolu Buki Suruki, which is it's a Talmudic epithet. It's an insult.
what does it mean?
It means idiots, empty vessels. V'hoitzoas shemra al oisoi tzadik. He said he's already called them tipshim once in this paragraph. They're idiots and they are empty heads and they're They were moitzi shemra on the tzaddik, on the Chofetz Chaim, keilu chas v'sholem omar al halacha psuka shehu min hashas v'nerishonim v'shulchan aruch. As if chas v'sholem, the Chofetz Chaim would be of the opinion that something that is explicit halacha in Shas, Shulchan Aruch, and Rishonim, she'enoi noyeg bizmanenu. It no longer is applicable. V'chas v'sholem, can't read that. La'akoir halacha psuka. Chas v'sholem, to uproot a clear halacha. Aval einayim lahem v'lo yiru. They have eyes, they don't see. Mashikosav lelamdom chumish v'noisei kelim u'musrei chazal. The Chofetz Chaim writes, chumish, and the commentaries. Now, this is interesting. It says, remember, yesterday we saw that the Kloisenberger was very unsure about, Ramban and things like that. But okay. And the pshat is that he's now giving interpretation. Here's the Satmar Rebbe's interpretation of the Chavetz Chaim. That's because the Chavetz Chaim understood that these things were never also mitzad hadin. Chumash, in other words, Torah Shebichsav, which is the chiluk of the Rambam, if you remember. Chumash and Neisei Kelim and Musrei Chazal, that was never included in the Melamdo Tiflus. Commission is by El. Elo Shebekama Doiris no Hagu, but then there was a so here's his interpretation. It is true that for many generations, no Hagu Silsul, I can't read it properly. Shaloi Lelamed Noshim Klal. It's almost as if we upgraded the Chazal to be machmir on ourselves as a minhag, not to teach women anything. And now, that is no longer the case. That's what the Chavetz Chaim is saying. There were reasons. For whatever the reason is. Next bit, which is underlined, and on that the Chavetz Chaim said, Shelefi Matzav Hadoir Shenisroifef HaKabbalah V'Yef Shelismech Al Kabbalah Sa'avos Mitzvah Lelamdeim Es HaMutar. So the Chavetz Chaim was rowing back on the minhag. The minhag was not to teach women anything. On that he said, no, we'll go back to the basic baseline halacha, and whatever is mutter to teach them, now it becomes a mitzvah to teach them. It's an interesting interpretation of the Chavetz Chaim. That's what he says. Fine. Okay, next paragraph. It's definitely it's a gomor to teach them Rashi. Excuse me, sorry. I'm a bit upset. Stomach here. But I'm not understanding, because before, when he quoted the Chavetz Chaim, did he not say the Neisei Kelim? I'm sure I read. Hold on. Mitzvah Rabbah. I can't find it now. But before, I'm sure I read to you that he said Neisei Kelim. I'm going to have to look over this again. Neisei Kelim means the commentators. Now he's saying Rashi. No way. It's a gomer to teach them Rashi. Ki divrei Rashi's al heinin kufei Torah. Rashi is Torah. Shabal Peh. V'oimek droshas Chazal. Of course, that would be included in the Issa. Uma shahoyu noegim likris tzenorena. They used to read the tzenorena on the Menorah Samoir, even though sometimes it brings a drosh of Chazal. But that's only somebody who's reading Bisfarim Hanal Beloshen Ashkenaz Einay Mevin Shum Drosha. When you read Art Scroll, okay, I'm going to update this. When you read Auf Deutsch, order of English, and this is really an incredible thing. Lashon HaKodesh is Lashon HaKodesh, because it is not only the DNA of creation, it is not only the language of essence, but it is soivel. In the language itself, it is soivel, it is multi-layered. The minute you move to a translation, by definition, and this is the whole thing with Yuvonis, etc., you move to a flat, one-dimensional, monochromatic, single layer of explanation. And in a translation, you not only, and I'm not talking about the idea, when you translate, let's say, Dostoevsky into French or whatever. And I get that, like Wittgenstein that says, all the cultural nuances are in a language, and I get that. I'm not speaking Russian, but I do get that. And if you put that into French, it's going to mean something else. I hear that. So then the art of translation is to capture as much as you can of the flavor, of the meaning, fine. But it'll only be one-dimensional. In Torah, a letter, there's gematria, there's remez, there's so much in the shape, even in the Al-Pi Kabbalah, in the shape of the letters, in gematria, there's so many different layers. That, the minute you put that into another language, whatever language it is, even over it, maybe, whatever language well, I am learning Vayel Moshe after all, so I can say that. whatever language you put it into, if it's not Lashon HaKodesh, you lose all those different layers. Yeah? Sorry. You lose all those different layers, and therefore with that he answers how the women were able to read Senorena in German, or for that matter in Yiddish, whatever, because it's just one-dimensional. Even though it does contain Chazal. But when you're learning Rashi is the Lashon of Chazal, the Lashon of the Medrash, the Lashon. That's no way. That would never be mutter.
Rob, what exactly is the Senorena? Because it came up like so many times.
It is I'm surprised they haven't done it yet. It is I believe it was written in German, in Yiddish, and it was Musa and Mamore Chazal, which women used to read. It was written deliberately for them.
By who?
I'm not too sure. I think we saw one of our Makoros. It was written by Maria Buach, but that can't be right. I don't think that's right. I'll have to. We can Google it, and we'll find out. Okay. Last little point. Ubelikute halacha is on that. Near Shehaven Miloshon HaRamah, the Chavetz Chaim understood in the Ramah, b'mashakos of Dinah Mashaichem le'Ishra, shekavanose rak al inyonei kashrus u'kedoima. Okay, it means women, of course, may need to learn halachas to know what they need to know. Fine, that is the Satmar Rebbe. So we have to summarize. We've had Rav Vosner, the Kloisenberger, and the Satmar Rebbe, pretty much all in the. And that is if you go in, and that is true if you go into. Not bells, definitely not, right? They are somewhere in between. In fact, an interesting quick story I remembered now. Yeah. So I actually, in London once a year, I did a little bit of work part-time every now and again for an organization called Klal Chazon, where they would deliberately allow girls and boys, I suppose, to some extent, to verbalize questions they have on Yiddishkeit, etc., and respond. And it was a little bit proactive as well. So I'll tell you a quick story, two stories, very quickly. One is I would in London. I don't know how well you know London, but in London there are two main Haredi Kehillas, I suppose. You've got Golders Green / Hendon, northwest London, and then there is Stamford Hill. Stamford Hill, if you say it, you've got to put in the Cockney accent. Stamford Hill is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it is the largest concentration of, certainly of Haredi Jews in Europe, that's for sure.
Very Hasidic, isn't it?
Very Hasidish, yes. Primarily. Very, very Hasidish. A big range, all the Hasidim, but it is, I don't know the numbers, but I don't know the numbers. It's got to be, it's big. It's definitely by far the largest concentration of Haredi, mainly Hasidish Jews in Europe, that's for sure. Outside of Israel and America, that's it. And it's pretty conservative. There is a Litvische contingent. There are some schools that cater for that as well, but it is predominantly Hasidish. So, and it's interesting, even though it's only, I don't know, a few kilometers from Golders Green, but in all the years I lived in Edgware, 18 years. How many times did I go to Stamford Hill? 25 times, 30 times maybe. Even though it's only a few. So, and some of the times I went was as follows. So I used to go every now and again to one of the SEMs there and one of the schools there and do some talks and stuff. And then I got, kind of almost out of the blue, got a phone call from the Menaheles of the Bells Girls High School. And I thought she'd got the wrong number. It was a Litvische Shagets, but I had a bod, and I wasn't wearing a long reckle then at the time, and basically the equivalent of a Shagets. So she asked me to come in and talk to the girls, do a presentation. I have a PowerPoint on, quite hardcore, demonstrating the reasonability and the probability of the existence of God and the Torah being given on Har Sinai and the transmission of Messiah, that you're not an idiot just to believe it, nor is it purely an article of faith. There is a huge amount of evidence that points in that direction. It's never going to be absolute, etc., etc. And I use a whole range of sources. Some of it was taken from my work, my time when I was with Seed, and developed some of my own material and other stuff as well. So I said to her, "Are you sure you want me to come and do this?" She said, "Yeah, absolutely." So I said, "Would you please check?" So she calls me back the next day and she said, "We've asked around in our contacts and the question went all the way to the Belzer Rebbe and he has said yes." Okay, I don't know the Belzer Rebbe and I'm sure he doesn't know me. But so I said, "Look, can I just point out to you that in this PowerPoint I will be quoting people such as Voltaire and Plato and Mark Twain and is that okay, or does it only have to be Torah sources?" She said, "No, it's absolutely fine." Cool. And it was really, really interesting. And it was a no. So I said, "Okay, if I'm coming, I only have one condition. I don't mind. I prefer if the teachers are not there, because the idea is to give the kids the feeling that they have a safe space where they can really ask whatever this is genuinely on their mind." I said, "I will not put any ideas into their head. Chas v'shalom. My idea is to demonstrate that Yiddishkeit is not, our emunah in our Messiah is absolute, but also to give it some sort of evidential basis as well." Anyhow, so she said, "No, that's absolutely fine. Absolutely fine." I went and they asked, I don't want to say more on the tape, but they were really thinking, and they asked good questions, and I hope I gave them good answers. Well, I guess it worked because I was always asked back every year after that, so that was that. And now here's another story, which I heard from Rav Zimmerman, when he was living in Monsey. And I imagine it was his daughter, I don't know. He said his daughter was in one of the Frum schools, Beis Yaakov's, and he gets a call one day from the Menahelet, who says, "Rabbi Zimmerman, we're very, very concerned in your daughter's class. Kids are asking all sorts of apikoros questions." So he said, "Okay," he said, "I'm very happy. I'll come in and I'll do a session and try and answer their questions." So he did. He said he came in and the girls asked all sorts of philosophical questions, and to each of them he said, "That's great. That's a really good question. Rabbi Yosef Albo asks that question, Sefer Ikrim. The Rambam asks your question in Meir Nevuchim. Rabbi Sadi Gorn asks your question." And he gave them answers. Nice. And on the way out, he said he went over and whispered into the ear of the Menahelet. He said, "It's not pshat that you have a class full of apikorosim. You have a staff room full of Amei Haaretz." And he walked out.
Mic drop. Ouch.
Yes. That is, I mean, obviously he must have, don't try this at home. He must have known the relationship, but Damashetoshiv, obviously. It's a fine line and it's a separate topic, really. Now that I've mentioned it, I think I'll just very quickly say a very short and quick party piece, which is actually important. And it's a topic on its own, and we could even got a lot of material on it. And that is Emunah books today. Yes, books about Emunah and come basically in two flavors, pretty much. And it's I don't know if you've noticed this, it's fascinating. There's one type which says, we absolutely just totally swallow everything that our parents have told us because they would never tell us something that isn't true, and chas v'shalom in any way to engage in any form of speculation or philosophical endeavor or using science or anything to use your brain to work out or to create any sort of evidence for emunah in Torah min hashamayim. That is the wrong approach, and it says led Klal Yisrael to very dark places in the past, which in some cases it has. The Chassid Yavit says this about the Inquisition, the time of the Inquisition, where he says that it was a whole generation was lost because of their over engagement with it wasn't the Renaissance yet, a bit too early, but with philosophy, hardcore philosophy. So that's one type of Emunah book with lots and lots and lots of haskamas. Chas v'shalom, don't do. And then you have another type of book which says pretty much the opposite. Also, often published by the same, more or less, Feldheim, Art Scrolls, CIS, whatever, Mosaica, from publishing houses, and it says the exact opposite. I'm bringing haskomas from sometimes even the same people. That, of course, we accept what we always teach our kids. We don't tell them it's tabula rasa. It's not, start again from a blank slate. Let's work it out on our own. Do we believe in God or don't we? Of course not. We don't do that. What we do is we teach our kids Messiah and Emunah in Chazal, of course. But in this skeptical age, there is a need to also use science, to use philosophy, to use other things appropriately, to overlay, to strengthen. Because if this is a generation where however we got here, whether it's because of technology, that's not even the point. The point is this is now a reality, and therefore there is a need to use chokhmah that we have, which until now was only used for kiruv. And I must tell you, as going through Gateshead and then Brisk, and on my own journey, a lot of things were never taught to me. And I think to myself, if I'm honest, and maybe that's just me, because I'm some sort of pseudo-intellectual, I don't know, but maybe that's me. But maybe other people just need, cholent and a kumsitz. That's fine, and that's what the Yiddishkeit is based on, maybe. And that's okay for them. Until the cholent goes cold and the music stops, and but that's another story. But when I got more involved as a relatively young married man in seed, and started learning the material that is presented in Aish and that sort of thing, and deepening it and taking it further and then connecting it back to the Torah sources, I was so excited. It was like I discovered, not because I didn't believe and now I believed, chas v'shalom, but because it added a dimension, it added a depth, it added a more of a rational basis as well. All from sources, things which were in the Torah. Rabbi Yeshua Heller, for example, wrote a sefer called Moez Hados to show. I'll give you an example. Rabbi Yeshua Heller is one of our greats, and he wrote, for example, here's a challenge for you. How can you show the existence of the Torah Shebal Peh in the Torah Shebichsav itself? And I don't mean through induction or deduction, through explicit reference in the Torah Shebichsav. So this is a big topic. It was one of the lectures I used to do for Seed. How can you demonstrate that there must be a Torah Shebal Peh? There's many ways you can do it. But one little tiny aspect of it, for example, was where there's a pasuk where Hashem tells Moshe, when you come into Eretz Yisrael, V'zavachta ka'asher tzivisicha, and you shall slaughter animals in the manner that I have commanded you. Open the Chumash. Doesn't say it anywhere. You have it's just one tiny little gargir that I picked up from Rabbi Yeshua Heller. And there's many others. There's a sefer by Rav Shlez, Niflois Miteras Hashem Yisbarach, which Baron Kotler used to be Meshabeach. There's all sorts of ways of demonstrating the beauty, the brilliance, the splendor of depth of Torah. And I got very excited when I was first, as a married young man, getting involved in frontline kiruv, getting exposed to some of this stuff, because it's mechazek emunah. It's not the basis of our emunah, but it's mechazek our emunah. Anyhow, so there are these other books which kind of go in and the previous set of books definitely call this set of books pretty much apikoros. And this is a trend. This is a trend. And today, I think, by and large, it is my understanding, my experience, with caveats. It's not a free-for-all, which is why that organization and others. But today there is the material that until now was very much only available if somebody was secular. I was saying to myself, why should it only be available to somebody who was secular and is interested, and we use it as a kiruv tool? Why can't we be Makarav Karavim? And today that is much more, it's mukubal, even in it's done carefully, but it really impacts.
But the fact that the example of the school that you gave, it sounds more like a clash of generations than...
To some extent.
Right?
To some extent. I mean, in a way, it's mirroring what we're discussing here, in a way. in a way. Is it... You see, this sort of thing, I'm sure, that I did in Bells would not be... In Satmar, it would be absolutely treif, no question. No question. But in the broader Hasidish world, it's much more makubal. Okay, Bells is particularly, believe it or not, it's quite a liberal Hasidus in a number of senses, and is more open to. They do a lot of kiruv. By the way, don't think Satmar don't do kiruv. It's a big mistake. Satmar have saved the lives of thousands and thousands and thousands of Yidden, whether it's from Yemen or what they did in Vienna and with refugees and stuff. Satmar, they do it in a different way, but that's another story. Anyhow, Shaim, sorry?
What did they do in Vienna?
They got not in very recent times, previously. Very, very involved. Read the histories of these things. Anyway, Shaim, let's round off this little piece. I'm sorry, this took longer than I thought, but that story of Reb Zimmerman, I think, is also instructive. Now let's look here at, on the same page, on page 5. This is about the Stipler, okay? Tammuz Tovshin Yud Ches, on the right-hand side of the page, yes? Tammuz 1958. Sha'alti es Mori Verebi, im Baal mutter lelamed es ishtoi, ha-moire mishnayas teira shebal peh, l'tzorech bechinot memshaltiot. Right? Top. Yeah? So this is Orchos Rabbeinu, this is about the Stipler. So I asked the Stipler, is it mutter to... Actually, hold on a second. Is he asking... Was he asking... Sorry, because I didn't look at the... Yeah. So he asked the Stipler, are you allowed to teach your wife who's teaching Mishnayos Torah Shebal Peh for the government exams, the Bagrut, I presume? V'heishivli kosav rak hamelamed es bitoi ki ila melamdo tiflos aval leishtoi loy have a tiflos. So interesting. Said the Stipler, this is... I nearly fell off my chair when I saw this the first time. It's as if you're teaching your daughter tiflos, but not for your wife. What would be the difference? What would be the difference? I mean, I'm asking that as a genuine question. Let's move on. For the per parnosa, it would be mutter, even lechatchila. V'chein le'inyan bitoi, or marmoi v'rebi, im lo yelamdu al Torah bizmanenu, have a tiflus tfei, ki tikros varum chitzoinim. In other words, this is, I mean, in stark contrast to the Satmar, what the Satmar Rebbe, and his understanding of the Chafetz Chaim. This is the Stipler, okay? So, no bleeding heart liberal, not a feminist exactly, right? Im lo yilam du Torah bizmaneinu have a tiflus tfei ki tikros varum chitzonim. This is exactly like we saw from Reb Zalman Sorotzkin. Next paragraph. B'shalom shach kach shuvam limei Rebbe shebenegel lelamid benois mishnayos ein issa hayoim bizmaneinu. V'adrabah mitzvah lelamdom. Teach the Mishnayos, not Gemara. And this is not like Rav Moshe Feinstein. Interesting. Teaching your daughter's Mishnayos. No Issa. Adrabah, he says mitzvah lelamdom. Pam shol agon Reb Chaim Kanievsky es Morona Chazanish. Heyois v'achois biksha mimenu sheyilmad me'ezah sugi b'Gemara. So Reb Chaim Kanievsky asked the Chazanish, his sister, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, whose sister? I'm a bit confused now. Shoal agon Reb Chaim Kanievsky is Morana Chazanish, Hayois v'achois biksha mimenu sheyilamid imo ezah sugya b'Gemara immuta. It sounds like the Chazanish's sister. That's what it sounds like. I'm not sure. Want to know whether he could learn a sugya of Gemara with her? And he said, and the Chazanish said, Bakroi mutter, which means on an occasional basis, not on a permanent basis. But that's to learn a sugya in Gemara. The Chazanish said on an occasional basis that would be okay. Whoever it was, quite fascinating. No? Omali Mary Rebbe Toiv Shabonis Yilmudu Shari Tshuva. They should learn Shari Tshuva. They should learn Orchos Tzadikim. Okay. Next one, Sipra Rabbonis, that her brother the Chazon Ish learnt Tehillim and Yeshaya with her. The Chazon Ish would teach. The Chazon Ish would teach her Tehillim and Yeshaya. Furthermore, she writes that when her brother was busy with a sugi and he needed to look in a Gemara and he didn't have the koyach to look inside, he would ask her to take out the Gemara and read it for her. And he for him, and he would explain it to her. Okay, really interesting. Next, Chashuke Chemed. This is Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein. Look what he says. Shaila. Ha'im mutar l'moira l'lamed bonis mishnayos. Okay, so presumably this is somebody who they're asking them to teach girls mishnayos. And if they want to know ideas from the Gemara, ha'im mutalot tshuva. Nema basaita kol ha'melamdas b'tetor kil melamda tiflis. Ubezay yivur Rashi b'Megillah shepesh ha'lot b'Gemara b'beis avina Ulam. But Likutei Halachos, that's all we need. Likutei Halachos, again, quoting the Chavetz Chaim. Kol zedavka bismaneinu, Kabbalas Avos, Maseches Avos, etc. Right? That's just the second paragraph is just a quote from the Chavetz Chaim. Third paragraph, Le'oyer zois, Ulai yesh mokom lehokel limud mishnayos im yesh tzorech b'dava. Maybe there's a need, if there's a need to teach mishnayos, if there's a need, then you could do so. My brother-in-law, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, this is Reb Zilberstein quoting his brother, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, said, Yitochen rak lonu osor, ein aleim issa sheyilmudu levat. But that's only, like we saw in the Maril and others, that's only also for us to teach, but for them to learn, maybe not. And with that, we finish this, but I want to move on. I want to move on now to exploring, first of all, an important story. And now we're going to go on to this. We're not going to do everything here because we've already done quite a lot of the Marim Kaimas, and we're going to turn straight to one of the big stories which you may or may not know about. The wife of Rabbi Meir, Bruria, the wife of Rabbi Meir. You know anything about her?
She went there somehow.
Okay, so this is kind of what is the narrative. So let's see. First of all, we're on page 2 of this. Okay, the great exception, Bruria. So first we're going to establish, and then we're going to spend maybe the next session or two. I'm collecting some historical material, right down to more modern times as well, of women who clearly were incredibly learned and Talmidei Chachomim, and they learnt and taught Torah in the most conservative of settings. Okay, we're going to spend a little bit of time on that. It's a bit more historical, but I found it absolutely fascinating.
Were they taught?
They learned and they taught.
Okay.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Okay.
You know what? We'll just do the very first source here, which is a Tosefta. Tanur, Tosefta in Kalim. I don't know if you know, but in Kalim there's Bava Kama, Bava Messiah, Bava Basra in Kalim, because there's 30 prokim in Kalim. If you ever learned Mishnah's Kalim. Anyway, Me'emosai Taharosai. It's talking about a tanur, an oven. When does it become tahor? Omer Chalaftish Kva Chananya, Ani Shaltis Shimon Bar Chananya. I asked this question of Shimon Bar Chananya, who asked the son of Reb Chananya ben Tradion, V'omar, and he said, da-da-da, Misha Seyamim Kaimai, Ubitai Omre Meres. And his daughter, however, argues, Reb Chananya ben Tradion, who, as we know, was killed very tragically, wrapped up with the Sefer Torah, one of the Asar Harugei Malchus, he had a son and a daughter. His son is quoted in the Tosefta as saying, this is the halacha of when a tanner or an oven becomes tahor. Ubitayim eres. And his daughter, that is Bruria, the daughter of Reb Chananya ben Tradion, who became the wife of Rabbi Meir, she says, here's the Tosefta quoting the halachic opinion of the daughter of Reb Chananya ben Tradion. She said, Mishei Pashetes Chaluka. Kshenemru Dvarim Ifnei Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. When these words were said in front of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, Omar Yofe Omra Bitoy Mibnoi. The daughter is, her halachic opinion is more correct than that of the son. So here you have an example of an exceptional woman, and it's true that sometimes, the exception proves the rule. This is an exceptional woman who is quoted in a primary source. This is a brisa, this is Tosefta, right? Quoted in a Tosefta, not only as having an equal voice in halacha as her brother, the son of Reb Chanani ben Tradian, but we then have one of the Tanoim, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, saying, actually, her opinion is more correct, and vindicating her halachic opinion. And that is the introduction to, probably a nice introduction to the next part of the topic, which is an exploration of women that did make it, as it were, in this very conservative world, and how do we understand that? To be continued.